Hello and welcome to our first live discussion, or my first live discussion here on Silver Tent TV. And today we're talking about sacred sites and ley lines. And we picked this morning with particular reference to tomorrow being the solstice. It's the summer solstice here for three of us on the panel, but it's actually the winter solstice for Sandy. So let me just start quickly by introducing the team and asking them why they chose their background, except in Katie's case where we had to abandon the background because she looked like something floating out of Harry Potter. So we'll finish with her. Let's start with Diane. Why did you pick this background, which looks like Avebury to me?
It certainly is Avebury. Yes, absolutely, Joanna. So the reason I chose Avebury, I love Avebury because it's always seems to me to be such a human-sized site. It's, you know, it's quite big, you know, there's quite a lot of stones, but there's something very human about it. And the last time, I mean, it's a long time since I visited, I have to admit, it was early 2000s now, the last time I was there, but it was lovely being able to lean against the stones and actually have conversations with them. So you know, I just think it's really gorgeous. And there's also a village inside, for those who've never visited.
That's certainly true, and it's very, very amazing place. It's one of my favourites actually, and of course, although it belongs to the National Trust, it's actually a free site, so you don't have to pay to go there, which is very special. Okay, thank you for that, Diane. Did you want to say anything about your experience with sacred sites?
Generally, my experience with sacred sites, yeah. I actually wrote something this morning. I've had lots of words downloading this morning, and so it's, for me, the work that I do, it's about connecting with the cosmos, yeah. But the sacred sites to me are a great way where it's grounded energies into the lands that we live on. And, you know, you can really feel that when you particularly visit sacred sites. It's amazing. And yeah, whether it's, you know, Stonehenge, Avebury, Glastonbury tour, the Abbey at Glastonbury is pretty special as well, you know, lots and lots of beautiful space. So yeah, just that kind of feeling connected, and it's almost like you can kind of draw up the energy from the earth that's come in there. So yeah.
Lovely. Okay, and we'll be explaining that that's kind of what makes it part of a ley line experience. So we'll come back to that. Well, let's get to Sandy now, all the way in Australia. So it's evening for you now. Would you like to introduce yourself and why you picked that lovely background, which is that Ayers Rock, or is that one of the canyons?
No, this is Ayers Rock, and I put a smaller picture of me down in the corner where I was actually there in 2008 and about to go back in August this year. So I'll look forward to that. But I picked Uluru because, or Ayers Rock as it used to be known, because I'm here in Australia and I have a great affinity with it. I work with the rock itself and Katajuka and a few of the other sacred spots around. I work with health, and I'm just going to read what it says here because I forget everything when I'm about to say something live. So Katajuka especially resonates to chakra 3, which I know we're not talking about, but just for people to know, you know, that infinity sign, as we'll call it, go around the world. And it's all about maintaining, Uluru is all about maintaining vitality and increasing health of individual beings. So I have quite an affinity with it. I love it. When I was there, I've been twice before, but this was my last time, 2008. It's just amazing, and it has lots of caves around there, and you can hop in there and you get lots of visions, and it's just an amazing place. It's just a rock out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, but a lot of sacred geometry comes to me when I'm there. A lot of, yeah, even the portals tend to open, but again, very grounding. So yeah, that's why I chose it, and I thought it would be a bit different seeing as everyone else is from the UK.
Absolutely, thank you. Well, many years ago I did climb Ayers Rock. It's not obviously encouraged now because the indigenous population
no, we can't climb.
don't like it, but I did climb it, and I made the big mistake of thinking it was a lovely hot day, so I'd not wear very much, like shorts and a very light t-shirt. I was absolutely frozen by the time I got to the top, and shows how innocent I was, because we were told that there would be a post box at the top, which was obviously a complete joke. So I carried these postcards all the way up there in freezing cold, and of course I had to carry them all the way back down again as well.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that would be an Australian joke. That would be.
That's not that a silly pom would fall for. Okay, so Katie, would you like to introduce yourself and why you haven't got your background? You'd like to.
Hi there. Well, yeah, the reason I don't know why I can't get a background, but I did look very disembodied, so we decided to leave it. My intention was to show you a photograph that I took a good few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, at the entrance pillars of Glastonbury Abbey, because I remember that I'd been there on a day trip with my mother. She came to visit me for a week when we lived in Bristol, and that was quite a special time. And she was really into interesting things, healing and sights. And I remember being in a certain part of the Abbey and really feeling like a vibrational energy there. And I then went back a good few years ago, and then for a third time went with my 2 sons, who were in their late teens, and I think the eldest was just early 20s, and they'd read all the Harry Potter books. And I said, no, on the way back from Cornwall, where we'd been with the family, I'm going to book us in for a night, and then we're going to go on to Glastonbury for the day before going home. And they were just amazed. They couldn't believe that a place like Glastonbury existed, the way people were walking around, the sights, you know, the tour. It was just the energy to the whole place. So they were really pleased that they came, and they've since both gone off in their own directions, in different spiritual directions, which I think is quite unusual for a 23 and a 27-year-old. And the oldest one really got into researching all sorts of things, and he follows a young man from Brazil who's a portal. He clears energy from portals around the world. That's his calling. So he's really into this guy. So yeah, fascinating. And so he often sends me stuff now that are really interesting. So I feel that was a very special time. And also really, while I'd felt there were things between different sites, ancient buildings, and I'd heard about different types of energies, I didn't really do anything about it until Joanna suggested. We started going to different places on the different lines, and I just love it. I can't even really explain why. I think it's just the idea, because one of you mentioned the walking in the footsteps of, for me, ancient ancestors, and wondering whether they were pilgrim lines, pilgrim tracks, or whether that came afterwards, how it all works. So I'm just pretty much open to anything. I love it, and any excuse to go out and wander around near a ley line, I'm happy.
Well, thank you for that. That's wonderful. And actually, I've not really met Diane and, well, Sandy, I would say, before today, but we've been communicating obviously about today and getting our images ready and being available, etc. But I hadn't actually seen their faces or met them until we were on just before the live now. So that's wonderful. Thank you, and welcome to all of you. So for those who are sitting there thinking, well, that's all very well, but what even is a ley line? I mean, sacred site pilgrimages have a long and established history, from the Hajj to Mecca, the Crusades, the Aboriginal walkabouts, to say something relevant to Sandy there, and the sacred Camino, path to Santiago de Compostela. They're all great examples of pilgrimages. And many years ago, I still have a company called Harmony Journeys. I haven't run any pilgrimages for a while, but I did used to take groups to Egypt as well. And I was often asked why people are attracted to sacred sites and what's the personal benefit of visiting them. And obviously here today, we've been listening to the experiences of the panel with regard to sacred sites, but the history goes back not that far. About the 1920s, a British archaeologist called Alfred Watkins hypothesized the existence of these lines, and he mapped a few, what he called ley lines, which he defined as an energy alignment connecting a number of sites, each with historical interests, such as ancient monuments, megaliths, etc., or sometimes geographical features, such as natural ridge tops, hills, and even waterways. And mystics believe that visiting these ley lines provides enhanced opportunities for connecting to the land, as our ancestors did, enabling us to somehow tap into a higher consciousness and thereby expand our spiritual awareness. So essentially, sacred sites are locations identified in ancient times where the veil between this and otherworldly dimensions is thin, and often they are energy hotspots positioned on strong ley lines, typically where many cross, or electromagnetic force fields, which I believe our ancient forefathers were able to detect, and hence they built some of these sites on a place that was already strongly energetic and powerful, like a vortex, if you like. So with practice, we can start to sense a tingling sensation, and when we're in these sites, and often visiting them brings a feel-good factor, and sometimes more than a feel-good factor. Sometimes, as some of the panel have mentioned, a sort of energy download that actually makes things clearer for them and makes you feel more spiritually connected. So probably the most famous sites in the UK would be Stonehenge, would be #1, and maybe Avebury #2, and they are actually on the same ley line. In fact, they're not on the same line, so completely wrong. Stonehenge is on one ley line which goes into London, and Avebury is on part of the Michael and Mary line. So let's just talk about some experiences here. I'm just wondering if I can show you a picture of some of these ley lines. Let's see if we can share the screen. I'm not sure if it's going to work to share the screen live, so you guys will have to tell me if you can see the screen share. Let's have a look at these ley lines here. Oh, is this going to work? I can't, it's not sharing, is it? Okay, so we weren't sure if it would work when we were doing it with the live. Can anybody see a share? I can't see it on the screen here, so I'm assuming.
No, we're seeing your ley lines chat now.
Oh, you are? Okay. Oh, you're seeing the page. Okay, wrong share. Right, so stop that share then. Well, we knew there was going to be teething issues, didn't we? So I thought I'd open them, but perhaps I haven't. No, I don't think that's going to work. What a shame. Okay, well, I wanted to show you some maps, but we might have to just post them afterwards. Well, the Stonehenge line goes through a number of different sites. I can name a few here. So Stonehenge one starts at Barking Abbey, and it goes through a lot more sites than this, but I created some maps on Google Maps, and it will only let you have 8 intermediate points, so I had to cut it down to that. So I've just picked a random 8 to just give us an image on the map, which I'll post up as a comment afterwards. So it starts at Barking Abbey, it goes through St Paul's Bow in Bow Common, and then the Tower of London. In fact, the Royal Mint is on it as well, and Tower Hill. It goes to Southwark Cathedral, it goes into Westminster, and both Westminster Palace and Westminster Abbey are on the line. Then it goes to St Mary the Boltons, then it goes through Staines. I think it goes through Feltham actually before Staines, although that isn't on this map. Then it goes to a place called Caesar's Camp in Finch Hampstead. Then it goes to Wick Hill, and it ends up at Stonehenge. So that is a very important line. And of course, Stonehenge is associated with the sun of the summer solstice. So we wanted to pick our live today to tie it in with tomorrow's solstice. And we will be, some of us as part of a task force of working on the ley lines, will actually be probably at one of these sites tomorrow. We're going to probably stop at somewhere in Chertsey, which is roughly along the line. So that's the Stonehenge line. Now let's just come back to the panel for a moment, because obviously we want to involve the panel. All of you have been to Stonehenge, I know. So would any of you like to talk about a particular experience that's memorable for you about Stonehenge? Who would like to give their experience first? Okay, Sandy, tell us what happened to you when you went to Stonehenge.
So even though I was born in London, we lived in Fordingbridge, which is near Salisbury. I went to Salisbury School, and we used to have picnics on the stones. And I just loved them. My whole family thought I was a bit nutty. I mean, I was probably from the age of 7 to 12, but I used to sit on the stones and put my hands on them. or I'd stand on them and put my hands on them, and I could feel vibrations going through me. And I used to just love it. I got a real buzz from it, not understanding what was going on. And you know, the rest of the family used to go, there she goes again. But that's my earliest memory. But I just love Stonehenge. I'm very sad now that you can't get near it, although I went on a few years ago when I was in the UK, I went on I had to go up to London to get on a coach, to go down to get on one of the early morning openings, and you're allowed to walk amongst the stones, but you're not allowed to touch them. But yeah, that's my earliest memory, and it's just very powerful place, very, very powerful.
Yes, and I expect possibly all of us on the panel, being as we're members of the Silver Tent and therefore aged sages, may well remember times when it wasn't closed off like that. And we're told that it was because, you know, there was graffiti on the stones, and there definitely was some graffiti on the stones, but I'm sure there are thousands and thousands and thousands of visitors who showed great respect and received really fantastic experiences from being there. So it is quite upsetting that now when you go, you have to walk in a very wide circle, probably 50 feet or 100 feet even away from the stone themselves, which is not the same experience at all. And you can actually hire Stonehenge. I have hired it a few times. You can hire it for up to 30 people. And we are talking in the £1,000 to be hiring it. And the biggest frustration is you have to pay 50% of the hiring fee when you book it. So if you want to book it for a specific date, as I've done in the past, you have to book it over a year before to get the date that you want. And then you're parting with about £1,000 of money, which you aren't going to see anything back on for really quite a long time unless people pre-book. So yeah, that's a bit of a deterrent, but you can go inside the circle if you do that, but you still at the moment aren't allowed to touch them or lean against them. And we're told that's because of, you know, lichen or lichen, as we used to call it. It's damaging that. Who knows what the truth is, but it's very frustrating, because I'm sure a gentle lean against the rocks would not do them any harm, but then you're, you know, immediately ousted from the site. So that isn't a goer. Okay, so, well, thank you for that. Now, Diane, do you have an experience you'd like to share about Stonehenge? And do you remember going there before it was roped off?
Oh, absolutely, because I was brought up in Bournemouth Pool area, and so Stonehenge is not terribly far away at all. So, I mean, actually, the contrasting experiences for me are interesting. So, you know, running around as a child, being able to play in and out, you know, out inside and out of the stones with my two brothers, you know, having a picnic there, you know, you just kind of rocked up and there you were, and, you know, had some fun, you know, and then wandered home again, you know, and just having, you know, played as you do. And then in about 2000 and gosh, what year would it have been? Early 2000s again, actually. I went there, and it was the first time I'd been there since it had been closed off. And I can't tell you how upset I was. I actually ended up crying. Gosh, it's brought it back. Wow. It was just such a difficult experience. At that time, when you went in, you were actually going down to go in, is the way they'd kind of set up the entrance way. And I was with someone, a friend of mine, and it was just horrible. And there was all this policing, and it really was policing, and it was just like, I don't like this, and it doesn't feel right, and, you know, so I had to get out of there ultimately. But then when I went back again, the last time I went was for a solstice. And that was great, because we got in there, I was playing a bowl, I'd taken one of my bowls, and so had my friend, and, you know, we were amongst all these people singing and doing all sorts of wonderful things, and that felt so much better. Still not great, but a lot better.
Yes, solstice is one of the times when it is open to the public.
Yeah, but it was still felt there was an awful lot of control, a huge amount of control, and that's the thing I have a problem with, because it's like this beautiful energy, these stones that belong to the land, and the land belongs to the stones, and then you've got this rigidity, you know, it's almost like, you know, you've got this prison around it, you know, that just just holds it. And it's like, yeah, no, I could get political here. I'm going to stop. I won't get political. Okay.
Probably right. Yeah, so I actually have been on one of the solstices as well. I think it was about 2011, something like that. But I mean, what you do is share it with about 19,000 others.
Yeah.
And naturally there are a fair few there who are very reverent about the stones, and obviously that's what you were tuning into, and you took your own bowl, and so you were able to create your own little circle of reverence within it anyway. But we did have people climbing the stones, etc., because, you know, as much as they've got security guards there, they just weren't able to police everybody staying off them. But in some ways, the people who were touching the stones there weren't particularly reverent, and some of them were climbing up and, you know, not showing much respect at all. So a bit of a mixed blessing, but an experience nevertheless. Yeah, so thank you for sharing that, and I share your disappointment in the treatment of Stonehenge now. Katie, do you remember going as a child, and have you been since?
No, I haven't. It's funny because we lived in Bristol when I was very young, but we never went there, and at the time I had no idea it existed. So I didn't actually get around to going until after it was all roped off. So I mean, I found I was just almost just projecting into imagining being in the stones, even though we had to stay so far away from them. So yeah, there wasn't anything really magical about the experience, but just there's obviously the sheer size of them is quite awe-inspiring. But we had a friend staying from Spain, and I'd decided to do a little tour of various areas. Did you know there's a Woodhenge as well?
Yes, I do. Yes,
Yeah,
we can
nearby.
Woodhenge,
So we went.
That's really interesting.
So so we went to Woodhenge, and we got there, and it's because it's basically on the ground. It's just where these wooden things have been. So it was very difficult to find them. I think it was a very dry day, and some of the grass had died down, so it was a bit easier. We were sort of scrabbling among trying to find the evidence of Woodhenge, but it was quite fun.
How long ago did you go to Woodhenge, Katie?
Oh, goodness me.
Because there are markers there now, so I'm wondering if you went before that.
Oh, I don't know. It would have been good 10 years ago, I reckon. Yeah. Don't remember exactly. Good while ago though. And yeah, so that was interesting. And then we went to, did we do Avebury as well? Can't remember if it was on that trip. And then yes, we went and had lunch somewhere near so we could see a white horse, which was nearby. So we did a load of visits in that time. It was a great day actually. But I would say more, as Diane mentioned, Avebury is one that appeals more to me because yes, you've got sort of like two circles of stones. So you've got the village in one and then the other in a circle. But I just loved walking around it and standing next to and just putting your hand out occasionally, just touching the stones and doing a slow walk around. I really love that. It's having that accessibility, isn't it? So yeah, Avebury was a better experience for me, I would say. Absolutely. And of course they have some nice crystal shops nearby.
Always guaranteed to be parting with our money in one of those. So yes, as Diane mentioned, Avebury is a huge, well in fact it's more than one stone circle at Avebury. There's a small stone circle and then a larger one which actually does contain the village. And there are a few Airbnb and accommodation sites within the larger circle, so that's really very special. We also have Silbury Hill near Avebury as well, which you know, and some of you may not know this, but there is, well, you will have heard of Marlborough College, I'm sure, which is kind of, I think was a boys' boarding school. I don't think it still is, but Marlborough is not very far from Avebury. And in Marlborough, they have a pyramid, actually. I think it's I can't remember if it's a straight and full pyramid or a step pyramid, but it's not really normally open to the public. But there was a UFO conference there a few years ago, which I attended, and we got to see and walk on the Marlborough pyramid. And the thing is, I think Silbury Hill is also a pyramid, but it's a mound, it's circular, but I think it's a feminine pyramid. And so I think Silbury is a pyramid to the moon, and that would normally have a different shape. And obviously Marlborough would be the sun version. So I'm getting very esoteric here. Hope you're all paying attention, you guys watching. But We've been talking about Stonehenge specifically so far, and Stonehenge, as I've already said, is aligned with the sun. So summer solstice and the winter, I imagine it's important there too, but summer solstice is very, very important at the Henge, and the sun is esoterically connected with masculine energy. So it's associated with the colour gold, and actually of the electromagnetic field, it is the electrical quality. So it also has an anti-clockwise feel about it as well. So those might be energies that you would feel if you went to Stonehenge. You certainly can project yourself amongst the stones, which is interesting that Katie claims not to have known anything about that when she went there, but clearly if she thought about projecting herself into the stone, she was a lot more switched on than she realized, because that is something that we can do even from a photograph or from imagination completely. That's a very powerful process. And if you are on site and you're doing it, then it's much easier to visualize yourself because you've got the backdrop there. So yes, if you do decide you want to go to Stonehenge and really connect with it, then you could connect more strongly by visualizing yourself surrounded by gold and really feeling the electrical qualities within yourself, and maybe even imagining an anti-clockwise spiral coming down from the sun, a golden spiral encircling you within the Stonehenge circles themselves. That would be very, very powerful indeed. So now, in complete contrast to that, Avebury appears to be aligned with the moon, and that might be why it feels potentially more powerful to those of us in the silver tent, being as, although, you know, gender wise, who knows what we might associate ourselves with these days, but for the most of us, we have a feminine connection enough to want to be linked with over 55s or over 50s, I think it is, isn't it, being silver tent, who are feminine. So now the difference with the feminine connection is, as I've already said, it's associated with the moon, and the colour is silver, has moonlight, like silver energy. It's a clockwise energy, and it has the magnetic quality of the electromagnetic field. So we could really feel a connection in Avebury by imagining a silver spiral coming around us from the ground, enclosing us, and imagining the magnetic qualities of that spiral, and starting at the earth, coming around and through us and ending up in the moon. And you know what, I think that would be a really lovely thing for us to imagine doing now, especially as we are a group of ladies. So let's just set the intention now that we were all holding etheric hands, if you like, and not obviously there are the four of us here. We know Steffi and Francesca are watching live, and we don't know how many others are. I'm just having a quick look here. Oh, Francesca's very surprised to hear about the pyramid in Marlborough. Okay, so we're just going to invite anybody else who watches this live later, either catches it later in this session or who watches it when it's on replay. So let's just invite all of the Silver Tent members who are interested and are watching now or later to be in our circle. And when they watch it, it might be many hours or days later, let them in this moment feel that they were part of the circle. So I'm just imagining that we're all in the circle now, and I'm imagining this silver energy coming up from the earth. Now we're going to, for those of you who know about it, we're going to invite it to come up through the earth from what we call the Wood Wide Web. So the Wood Wide Web is a network of roots, tree roots, that go back to very long time, thousands of years or more. And they are the way in which trees communicate with each other. And it's something that Katie and I work with a lot because we're forest bathing guides, and together we run Harmony in Nature. So we teach about the Wood Wide Web, but I know that many of you have been studying it also as part of the Roots session run by Frances Amanda Briggs. I get her name right. Sorry, I missed your first name there, Frances. First attempt. So Frances Amanda Briggs has been doing a Roots program, which I know Francesca has been part of, and as part of that, they have been really feeling themselves connected right down into the earth with this root system. So we're imagining this silver spiral starts maybe even at the center of Mother Earth, at her real iron core, and then coming up from there through the Wood Wide Web, connecting all of us, clockwise spiral, silver spiral, magnetic spiral, and it's going up, taking us all the way up to the moon. So we're feeling this silver energy going through our circle. It's going out of our left hand, going round the circle and coming back to our right hand. That's the clockwise direction. And we're creating a silver pillar. Can we now just feel that energy of the silver pillar, connecting the silver tent members? And in this moment, I'm going to set the affirmation, if you're comfortable with this. Each of us can say it in our own words, but this is my suggestion if you can't think of any. I am happy. I am healthy. I am abundant. So I am happy. I am healthy. I am abundant. I am fearless. I am invincible. I am ageless. I am fearless. I am ageless. I am invincible. Finally, I am a silver tent goddess. I am a silver tent goddess. I am a silver tent goddess. Oh, I can really feel that energy going around us. Thank you for all that you're putting into the circle, you ladies. And if anybody feels they want to project themselves into that pillar and just really feel it running through them from their feet all the way through their central meridian, through from their earth chakra, the one 6 inches below the feet, all the way up through the root, through the sacral, through the solar, through the heart, through, in my system, the thymus, through the throat, through the third eye, through the crown, through the soul star chakra, right up into the stars and planets. Feel ourselves part of this earth ley line chakra system. The ley lines are the meridians of Earth's own chakra system, in my view. And sacred sites are the chakras. And there are many thousands of chakras on the earth, and there are charts somewhere or in some places of what are considered to be the main 7 earth chakras, and they don't always tie up the same. Often the pyramids, or the Great Pyramid in Egypt, is considered the throat chakra. Often the crown chakra is Machu Picchu. I think some of them do have Uluru as one of the chakras over in Australia, Sandy, but most often, if you look online at the chakras of the world, what you will find is almost always the heart chakra is in the UK. And it's usually the triangle between Avebury, Stonehenge and Glastonbury. And so here we are doing our visualization in the tent, and we can imagine that we're in the heart of this centre of Avebury, the circle at Avebury, and that is right on another line that I haven't talked about yet, and I'm going to mention it now. It's called the Michael and Mary line, and it runs all the way from St Michael's Mount, in fact past St Michael's Mount, there's another point right on the coast as well, right up to Hopton in East Anglia. And it goes through Tiverton, it goes through Taunton, it goes through the Hurlers, that would actually be before those other sites. It goes through Glastonbury and Avebury, and it carries on through Royston, Bury St Edmunds, and then it goes on up to Hopton, as I've said. Hope I've got that right. And I did have a lovely map to show you, but blasted, I can't get the share to work. I haven't got it on the right format. It was on the Word document that I'd pasted them, but I will post it up afterwards. So that is also a really important line, probably the most well-known ley line within the UK. And it's called the Michael and Mary line because there are 2 energies running through it. We've got the Michael aspect, which is going to be the gold sun element, if you like. And then we have the Mary silver element, and that would be the feminine one, the moon energy. And for a lot of the line, they do run concurrently. And in fact, for those of you who don't know the map, there is a version of the map on our event information about today's live. So we did manage to post a map on there of the Michael and Mary line. So for a lot of it, they run together, but at Avebury, they don't. They separate. They cross over at 2 points. They cross over at the sanctuary, which is right on the A4, and it's not, there's nothing there anymore. It's rather like Woodhenge that Katie explained. It's a site that was magical and very important in the past, but now it's just a marker, if you like. But go there, it's powerful, and it is one of the crossing points. The other crossing point at Avebury is by the Devil's Chair, and there's nothing to do with the devil at the Devil's Chair. I do believe that is well, we could get political here, as Diane pointed out. Perhaps that's not what we want to do, but I think that's just been a term to maybe put off people from going there. It's actually very, very powerful. And it almost certainly might be the two stones behind you, actually, Diane. Do you remember, was one of those the Devil's Chair? Because
this isn't my picture. This isn't my picture.
This is off the internet.
The internet, yeah.
Will be the gateway that goes past the Devil's Chair, and that is one of the crossing points at Avebury of the Michael and Mary line. Now the Mary line goes off through Silbury Hill. The Michael line doesn't, and this is another reason why I'm sure that it is to do with the moon. Silbury Hill is to do with the moon. And the ancient indigenous teacher that I had, who died in 2008 in Egypt, but he taught me that the aliens landed. This is what he believed. This is an indigenous belief, right? It's not something I've made up. He told me that the aliens landed on some of the pyramids in Egypt, and it's my belief, if that's the case, that they almost certainly landed at Silbury Hill, because it is the prime site in the UK for UFO spotting. And I have actually seen a UFO there myself, but I'm not sure if this is the time for that. If anybody wants to ask me about that, I will talk about it. But Silbury Hill is definitely where the Mary line goes, and then it goes off through Kennet Longbarrow as well, West Kennet Longbarrow. So they snake a bit apart there, and that's what makes Avebury so magical, and why we're working with it energetically here. Okay, so I'm just going to open up now again, because I feel like I've done a lot of talking and we've got a great panel here. So maybe some of you would like to share experiences that you've had yourself in Avebury, or you might like to share what you felt with this circle. And I'm just going to check if there are any comments and questions on the line here.
Well, I'll go. I'll go.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's lovely to be on this panel in this circle with people who've been to Stonehenge. It's obviously a long time since I left there, but it just remains just one of the magical spots on earth, the most magical to me. Maybe that's because it was in my childhood, I don't know. But I've visited quite a lot of different places around the world, sacred sites, and yeah, they're all magical in their own right. But I really love being on this panel because I love ley lines. I've delved into ley lines right around the world. I've got earth chakra. Oh, you can't see it because of this silly background. Anyway, earth chakras. I've got ley lines here, books which you can't see. But anyway, otherwise I'll have to show. But I've got heaps and heaps of books. I've delved into it. I've met people who've really got into ley lines, and I have my own divining rods, and I've used all this for years. So it's really magical to be on a call where other people are doing similar things, because a lot of the time, it might just be because I'm in Australia, there's not as many people attuned to things. You know, England's a smaller place, so it's easier to gather together. So loved it, loved being on this call, and love sharing, and looking forward to seeing who else gets on there, onto the call, onto the TV, and starts asking questions, because there's an awful lot people don't know about our Mother Earth. So
absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that, Sandy. Well, remember, this is episode 1, so we're just introducing at the moment the concept.
Yes, good.
And you know, if there's demand for a follow-up one, we can perhaps ask for questions from today to be submitted. And we've had a few questions sent in actually, and I know Katie's got a list of them, so we'll come round to those in a moment. I have had a request to say a little bit more about the UFO thing, so I'm just going to very quickly say that I was standing by Silbury Hill, no surprise, and I was there with my 2 children who rather wish they weren't there because they would like to block from their memory the fact that they witnessed a UFO, and they've come up with all sorts of explanations of why it wasn't one, but that's another story. And I was also there with another very spiritual friend and her daughter, who was even younger than my children. So my children were probably about 10 and 9 or something. Hers was about 6. So we looked up and we said, wow, that's a very bright star. That might be Venus. And as we looked at it, it split in half and shot off in 2 completely different directions, very, very fast, and then came back together again and formed another star, or back to the original star. So we were completely taken aback by the experience. And since then, well, it must have been the RAF, or, you know, so we've had lots of explanations that it was something to do with the military, and perhaps it was. But you know what? If it was to do with the military, I'm fairly sure that they've also been working with the UFOs, so that doesn't necessarily rule it out being a UFO. And since the UFO actually is an acronym for unidentified flying object, that it certainly was. So I'm sticking with my story. And of course, the other interesting thing about Avebury is it's the actual global centre of crop circles. There more appear there than anywhere in the world. There are others in other places, but that is the hot spot, perhaps out as far as Alton Barnes, which is in the same vicinity as well. And I understand crop circles from, I know a lot of experts about crop circles. I'm not an expert in it, although I have visited many and lost many hours. I've mentioned on one of the other chats that I went into a crop circle once. I thought I'd been in 45 minutes. When I came out, 6 hours had gone by, or if it's even 7 hours, I think. We just didn't know that so much time had passed. And the bizarrest thing was that I was there with 2 friends and we were completely sunburnt, and it was a very, very overcast day. So we don't know if it was radiation burn or something else had happened, but we definitely know that something extraordinary happened, and they do in many of these crop circles, although some are man-made for sure. And those the circle makers, the really good circle makers, man-made ones, then they are being guided by something greater than humans to make them. That I'm sure about. And definitely from the experts that I know about ley lines, and I have studied them as well, that lots of lights are often seen around the time that the crop circle is manifesting. And there's even a pilot who gave evidence many years ago that he flew over Stonehenge, it was actually, and 45 minutes he flew back over, and a crop circle had appeared in that 45 minutes right in a field opposite Stonehenge. So I don't know any man-made circle maker, I don't know any human, sorry, I'm tripping over myself, I don't know any human circle makers who could have done that in 45 minutes. And nobody saw anything about it being made. So we're on to something incredible here. It is supernatural, what we're talking about, and that's not comfortable for everybody. So as I said, I'm only giving my opinions. They're not necessarily to be taken as fact. In fact, it's very healthy for people not to take them as fact and to use their own intuition and guidance. Okay, right, so that's all I'm giving you about that today. If you want to hear more, you'll have to put it on the questions, and we'll do it in episode 2. So Diane, should we come to you and then come to Katie so she can do the questions, or would you like to go to Katie next?
I don't mind. I just want to say that when we did that little visualization, that was intense. It was intense. And I found it really interesting because there was a person who was brought to mind, somebody I met nearly 14 years ago now when I was on a workshop. And she was a nun, although most people in the workshop didn't know because there were 3 nuns there, but they didn't wear habits. And she was beautiful. And she just had this amazing pillar of white, silvery white energy is what she carried with her. And I was just taken back to that. And I just think, oh, that was something about Anne. That was really interesting. So yeah. But beautiful, really beautiful. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. It's funny, I don't know very many nuns, and a lot of them are called Anne. How bizarre is that?
Yeah, these were 3. It was Paula, Anne, and Rosie, and they were just fabulous. Fabulous.
Well, that's dispelled my theory that you have to be called Anne to be a nun.
Absolutely.
Okay, I do know another one called Lorraine, to be fair, but she was a nun for about 17 years and then decided it wasn't for her. Okay, so Katie, let's come into you, and if you'd like to talk about any experiences you've had at Avebury, and then you've got some questions, haven't you, that you've been thinking about and some that were submitted. What would you like? And you could talk about your task force time as well. We've got about 15 minutes because Katie is part of our leyline task force.
Yeah, we call them, it might be task force 555, or depending on what the year number adds up to. We try to get threes in.
We do.
Yeah, I think it was 555 this year, so we have 666 next year.
Well, it'll be 777 next month. Because the year is 5 if you just take the year 23. So we called it that in May because we did quite a few things in May. But yeah, it's 555 at the moment. Yeah, well done. Go on.
Yeah. Well, I found the visualization quite powerful as well. I could really feel it moving the left hand, the right hand around. So it did feel quite powerful, that actually. Yeah. Let's go on to some questions, because the questions that were sent in were actually questions that I had, really. I haven't delved much into it, and you did introduce a little bit about what Alfred Watkins thought they were, but I was curious to know as well as this person, how do we know if any or many of the old pilgrim paths follow the leys? Are they, because obviously pilgrim paths, they would have been walked generally.
Good question. Thank you for posing that. So only my view, and if anybody else in the panel wants to jump in, feel free. I believe they would have created a ley line if they weren't following one. So ultimately there would have been a ley line happening between, say, here and Jerusalem. Of course, we could then get into the Knights Templars, who were the well, they were like a kind of group of military I don't know what you'd call them. They were paid guards, but they were all very spiritually trained as well. And it's really where banking started as well, because when you used to do these walks, if you were guided by the Templars, they would have had money available en route at the various Templar stations. But as many of you know, they were all wiped out by the royalty of Europe and by the Pope as well, back in, I think, the 11th or 12th century, 1100s. I might have gone as late as the 1300s because I haven't got the information in front of me now. We're talking a long time ago. But the thing is, I believe you create a ley line when you have a strong spiritual intent. So if those individuals were moving across the world with that intent, carrying that intent with them, I think they more than likely were already following a route, but they most definitely would have been creating one.
Thank you.
In my opinion.
Yeah. So on the other question was, can you use dowsing to find a ley line? And if
Absolutely.
So, how would you record the ones that you find? And so if two ley lines cross, how can you tell apart the energy of one ley line from another? Or is that possible?
That's a very good question. Well, I think Sandy is wanting to answer that, I think. Are you? You can deny it. You don't have to answer.
No, I've been to Damanhur in Italy, which you may or may not know of, but I was practicing with my dowsing rods, because there's about 6 or 8, I can't remember, ley lines that cross over there, and they just go round in circles. It's very hard to tell. If you really concentrate, you can follow a path, each one, but it's difficult. Otherwise, they just like to spin around. Yeah. So I guess once you know that they're not just going in one direction and they're spinning, that usually tells you that you're going over multiple lines. So that's just my experience. Yeah.
So you've been using dowsing rods, Sandy, yes?
Yes, I've been using dowsing rods for years.
So the rods, you can make them out of an old hanger, actually, can't you? Although I'm sure you've got something more.
You can, and you've got to hold them a certain way, though, because otherwise you're going to, people think you're in control of them. The best ones I had, which my daughter now has, who lives in Sheffield in the UK, are the ones where you actually there was brass outside and the rods went inside, so you didn't actually have direct contact with them. And they were actually beautiful ones, and I might get them next time I go over there. Get them back off. They're hard to find.
Yes, she's obviously guardian of them at the moment.
Yeah, a cheap way of doing it, if you want to use that, you know, just to practice, is I'm sure you know this, is to use, as you say, the wire hangers, but to stop holding them, just get a couple of old biros and just take the you know, just pop it in the plastic bit of the biro, and then it spins freely. So that's for anybody watching, if they've never played with them, that's a really good way to start, and not expensive.
That's a lovely little tip, unexpectedly, from Diane there. Fantastic. Okay, and in fact, because obviously hangers can be of various quality, you can, if you can get some copper wire, doesn't have to be very strong, but it's quite easy to bend copper as well. So you basically bend it into a right angle, place the two handles through the outside of an old biro. Brilliant, I love it. And then you just hold the biro part, and the rods will swing around. I mean, if anybody wants to know more about that, maybe we can try and have some dowsing rods available to just show quickly on the screen in another episode. But that's the only one form of dowsing. I personally use pendulum. So I've got
one of those too.
Yeah, it's only partly shown.
Joe's frozen. I don't know if it's me.
I'm frozen. That's not what we want, is it? The energy was just too much at that point. But yeah, I use a pendulum. Okay, Katie, back to you then. There.
Yes, fine. I've actually got some. A neighbour of my dad's gave me some, actually, that he'd made out of wire and a couple of biro cases. So I've got some. Fine, they're really nice and free flowing. It works really well. Actually, I suppose this is maybe a question for Sandy, actually. So, whether underground electricity or water courses could interfere with that, would that be something that she could detect the difference? If you've got, say, ley line near water, for example, is there a difference in the energy flow?
I've actually used them a lot for finding water, but then finding water in Australia is a bit different to probably other places. It's just when you're right out and you haven't got any water, and you can actually find water and you can dig down and get some. So it is a little bit different. It's a little bit different, hard to explain, but it's the intention, because I'm looking for this or I'm looking for that. And also, I guess when I've looked at ley lines, you sort of have an idea about where the ley lines have been marked already. So I'm not finding new ones. So it's just keeping you on track. So that's about all I can give you at the moment.
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just add a little bit there? Just when I lived up in the northeast of Scotland, obviously that's oil capital of the UK. And so I knew a dowser there who was called on by oil companies to dowse for oil. And that's not commonly known. But also the farmers who, you know, were these wonderful, you know, typical northeastern chaps, very earthy and, you know, no nonsense. They used dowsers to find water for their animals.
Amazing. Yes, I mean, the men keep it very quiet that they know about dowsing. And I remember many years ago when I first got into healing, and that's a whole nother story. But one of my sisters, I've got two sisters, the angel author is my older sister and my middle sister is a garden designer. I'm the youngest. And I went round to see my middle sister, and she said, oh, one of my friends here is a man. He's got an abscess on his face and he needs some healing. I said, oh God, I thought, why did you ask me to give healing to a man? Because, you know, they're so disbelieving half the time. So I was really embarrassed. And to make it worse, the first thing I said to him was, I didn't know I was going to say it. That's the other thing about when you start channeling things. I said, have you got a mosquito bite on your bottom? Which wasn't the sort of thing you really want to be saying to somebody you've never met before. And he said, no, but I've got a red ant bite there. And I said, what does that feel like? And he said, like a mosquito bite. So that was really good sort of feedback to how my body gives me information. So anyway, then it turned out he was a dowser, just like you said. And I didn't know much about dowsing at the time. And I said to him, so how do you know, what do you dowse for then? And do you know what he said? Very much like Sandy said, he said, whatever I'm thinking about at the time. So, you know, once you get into dowsing, once you're connected with your pendulum or with your rods, then you become part of that process, and you are then in charge of what you're looking for. So yeah, they know about it. They know. It's just like, you know, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is the connection of royalty with the land, and I'm only going to say it in 2 minutes because I want to come back to Katie now. But the land has to endorse royalty as the rightful monarch, and that is why they had the stone of Scone under the Edward's chair where Charles III was crowned, because that has to endorse his right as the sovereign. And in fact, the story of Arthur and the sword, the reason Arthur could pull the sword from the stone was because the stone recognized Arthur as the rightful monarch. So this is still going on, and although we aren't told about it, it's really, really important. Did you know, for example, that Prince William was born on the summer solstice? And maybe he was induced early, or perhaps there's some divine intervention, who knows? But this is fascinating stuff. And in fact, Prince Charles was born on either a new moon or a full moon, I forget which, but it's all tied in with the moon cycle as well. So tomorrow, Katie and I and our task force we will be working on either the coronation line, which is called the coronation line because obviously the crown and the corona, the picture of a crown, the reason we have all those bits on the top of a crown is to make it look like the rays of the sun. The sun is an infinite part of it. And that's why it's called a coronation, the corona. It's about the sun. So we're talking about the lineage of our land is intimately connected with both the ley lines and with the sun. So we'll be working on either the coronation line tomorrow, and more than likely we'll go to Kingston where 7 Saxon kings were crowned. We're going to be there at 11 o'clock, and then later we're going to the Stonehenge line that we looked at very quickly, or I talked about the stopping points on it very quickly earlier, and we're probably going to go to St Anne's Hill, which was all part of a convent linked with Staines. So we feel it will have a connection with that Stonehenge line we talked about, because Stonehenge, remember, is connected with the sun, and if you like, we'll be bringing the moon energy because we're all part of the tent. We're part of that silver moon movement, if you like. So if any of you want to go to your local sites and connect with us, 11 o'clock we'll be doing something, and we'll be doing something else at the height of the solstice, which I think is something like 3:57 tomorrow afternoon. So if you want to tune in then you can do that. We can also bend time, but maybe we haven't got time to tell you about bending time with Eth. We'll have to save that for another time. Okay, Katie, any more final questions?
I think it was this sort of relates a bit to what we've been doing. So the question was, if the energy in a ley is disrupted, would you attempt to bring the energy flow back to where it was originally intended to be? And if so, how would you do that?
What a fantastic question, and probably not one I can answer in 1 minute, so I will do my best. Okay, so we know ley lines can be diverted. That's another story, okay, because we know people who douse for ley lines, and we know that if a ley line goes close to a crop circle, the crop circle can deviate the line momentarily. So we know it's doable. We know that ley lines can be quite wide. They could be as much as a mile across in places, so that's another issue. So I think they can be disrupted, and that's kind of what our task force is about. And I know you were asking that on behalf of someone else anyway, because you know that you have made a difference to crop circles and, well, not crop circles, I didn't mean to one, sorry, ley lines, Katie, because you're part of the task force. But anybody can be part of a task force. It's about intent, like we said about the dowsing. If you want to make a difference, if you haven't got a chance of going to a special sacred site, do what we suggested earlier. Project yourself into a sacred site. Choose one that feels important to you. It could be going back to Avebury like we did etherically earlier. And we need to disband that circle, by the way, at the end of this. So yes, I believe we can put it right, but I'm only one of many, and I'm only putting my own hypothesis forward. So I'm doing what I think is the right way, which is to go either to that ley line or to project myself into a sacred site on a ley line and send positive intent for that ley line to be given love. That's what does it. Love is the energy that we need to be channeling, and it has to be unconditional love. But anybody can do that with intent, I believe. Okay, so we're just over the hour. I want to just check, does any of you have anything you really wanted to say and didn't fit in?
It's okay. I think you've covered it, Jo.
Okay, so let's disband our circle then before we close off. And so anybody who joins the circle later, when you watch the recording, we're now going to bring that circle to an end. So we just gradually bring that silver column back down to the earth, and let the earth absorb it back in, if you like. And very importantly, we say thank you. We say thank you to the earth, thank you to the moon and the sun. If we want to bring in the angels here, it would be Melchizedek for the earth in my system, Gabriel for the moon, Raphael for the sun, but whoever you want to bring in. And just thank whatever angels or supportive guides have been with us for allowing us to have that experience. Thank those of you who are attending live very much. Big thank you to my panel, Diane, Sandy and Katie. And if you've loved it, let us know and ask us what you want us to present next time. And the same panel will be invited. They may not be available and there could be vacancies in the future. So if you want to be on the panel, let us know. And we'll bring everything to a close. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye from us.
Thank you, Jo.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.